So this might be a bit of a poorly timed video to make, but I was making a video about my best and worst movies of 2024. So I thought I would also just make one about 2023 while I was at it because I felt that was a more extensive list. And 2023 wasn't that long ago, even though this might be irrelevant making it now here at the outset of 2025. But I mean, I don't know. It's just a few years ago, so I figured I was already at making a movies list anyway, so why not? So just like the 2024 best and worst, this is going to be a best and worst of 2023. And with this one, just like with the last one, I will start with the worst at the bottom and then work my way up to the best. So let's get into it. In 2023, I actually saw a lot of good movies. That was about one of the only good things about 2023. The rest of it really was not a particularly great year for me, but I won't go into that. But there was definitely still a few movies I hated that I saw in 2023. And one of them was Transformers Rise of the Beasts. And it was undoubtedly the worst one of 2023. And for me, this one held a little bit of special meaning in where it hit me and when I saw it. And that was that I actually like the old Beast Wars saga from the 90s, which is part of what inspired this movie with the Maximals and Predacons, except they didn't even bother to put the Predacons in this, they just put Maximals. But this wasn't so far from that lore and from it was so non-canon from that it just was painful. I knew it would be a little that way, but I still was curious about it. Um, I mean, I've seen the old Transformers movie, the Michael Bay ones, and they are what they are. But I actually still enjoyed like the first two ones, though they were incredibly stupid. I mean, it was pretty much what you knew it would be. It would be big robots fighting and slightly gratuitous pictures of Megan Fox or whatever actresses they put in it, and it was a little over the top and stupid. But I mean, it was enjoyable stupid. At least I thought the first two were. After that, I stopped seeing like the third through the sixth or whatever ones they made. Oh, and by the way, Bumblebee on that note was a good Transformers movie. It was not as stupid as some of the sequels. But this one was awful. I mean, it just like in the one I when I mentioned werewolves in my previous of the worst of 2024. Well, this one actually took itself seriously, and it tried to make the characters really sad and very serious, as if that means the movie has to be good. Because if the characters have depressing life stories and are serious, you have to take the movie seriously. You can't roll your eyes at it. I think that seems to be the logic of a lot of modern movie making. And I hated, how they tried to do that in this movie. And you didn't have to worry about gratuitous, pictures of the girls in this one because none of the girls in this movie were hot at all, and the guys were all just morons. I mean, okay, I'm gonna give away the spoiler at the end, but the spoiler is so stupid that the only thing is it'll make you laugh a little, but it'll also just make you just vomit because it's so stupid, a little in your mouth. And that was they try to merge this universe with the GI Joe universe at the end of the Transformers movie. Like he gets after he has the big battle or whatever with the robots, and he gets talks to the government, and they want to induct him and his Transformer friends into the GI Joe program. I mean, good lord! And the worst part is you could tell the movie thought it was being really clever. So, anyways, yeah, don't waste your time unless you just have such a hard on for the Transformers series that you've loved every movie they've made. I would not recommend seeing this. That the only reason again I saw it is just because I have a little bit of a soft spot for Beast Wars. I still have my old Megatron Beast War here, in fact. But anyways, moving on. Another one towards the bottom of the list. Scream 6. This one I'd seen like Scream 5. I think that was it, Scream 5 back in 2022, which actually was pretty good. And I was kind of hoping this would be like that. But no, Scream 6 it was just mindless, people getting, diced and, a lot of goofy, self-deprecating, snarky humor here and there throughout the movie that you could tell it thought was so funny about the Scream series. Also, not helping this movie was the fact that, I mean, when I was there at the theaters, there were some people there being very loud and rude that also made it hard to enjoy. But whatever the case was, this movie was just boring. I didn't like it, and I would not recommend it unless you just love the Scream series so much that you would enjoy any Scream movie. Um, then moving up the list, another movie I would not really recommend, Little Mermaid, the Disney live action. It wasn't terrible, and I guess I kind of liked seeing it just because I like aquatic things and I liked all the CGI aquatic creatures. And I forget what the name of the actress who played Ariel was in this, but she was kind of nice to look at for an hour or so. But the movie was stupid. It was just like all the Disney live action remakes. It was a soulless cash grab of a remake that somehow still made some money but was terrible. Again, I would not recommend seeing it unless you're just like me. I was really happy that day that I went and saw it though, because I just needed something to celebrate with, because I had just been like desperately trying to get a job, and I finally gotten a job offer, and it was like, oh, thank goodness, I don't have to worry about being homeless. So I just went to do something to just relax for an hour and get out of the apartment and celebrate. And so I went and saw this movie, and it wasn't something I would, it could have been worse, I guess. But anyways, moving on. Cocaine Bear, the next movie. This movie was about as stupid as it sounds. It's a bear. It's bears that are on cocaine. Sorry to give spoilers. And FYI, before I go any further, there's going to be a lot of spoilers in this, though I'll try not to spoil anything too good. But I mean, as you can guess, a movie called Cocaine Bear is about bears on cocaine, as the trailer suggested. Some like cocaine slip. And the thing I guess I thought about this was like that the bears were like going to be accidentally hyped up on cocaine, but no, in this it's even dumber. The bears get addicted to cocaine and then are killing people, and there's not much else to say about it. That's the premise of the movie. And it was the only reason I kind of liked it is it was funny, as you can imagine. It was supposed to be funny, but like some of the other movies I previously mentioned, this actually had the gall to take itself seriously on occasion. And a movie about bears hyped up on cocaine has no right whatsoever to take itself seriously. So unfortunately, this movie kind of did, which is why it sucked. So yeah, moving on. Another movie that I probably would not recommend, and I'm a little embarrassed to admit that I saw this, but I remember I was just bored and I saw it. It had been in theaters, so then I saw it later on streaming, and I guess it just looked kind of funny. Ruby Gillman, Teenage Kraken, which is basically what it sounds like. It's about a cartoon movie. It is a little bit of a kids movie about like it's a CGI. I think Pixar made it, where she's kind of a weird family of weird people, and then she finds out they're all krakens because she starts growing and becomes a giant kraken, and then the mermaids are like the bad guys in this, and has a fight with a mermaid, and I mean it was pretty stupid, honestly, but I guess the animation of it was very good, and I can't help but for a kids movie found that enjoyable. A lot of people, though, this movie was seen by hardly anybody, so very few people probably would agree with me that it was at least not the worst quality and not a great movie, especially for a dumb kids movie, but I thought it was at least watchable because of the good animation and moderately, funny and entertaining storyline, but probably wouldn't see it a second time. Okay, those are the bottom tier movies of 2023. Now moving kind of into the middle. So in the middle tier, we would have, okay, at the bottom of the middle tier, Barbie. Obviously, a lot of people saw Barbie in 2023, a hugely popular but hugely controversial movie because of its commentary about gender relations. And I found this movie to be a little over the top in its commentary as well. I mean, this movie is about a live act doll that comes to life and is in the human world, where Will Ferrell is the CEO of Mattel and Margot Robbie plays the Barbie doll, and what's his name plays Ken. I forget his name. Ryan Gosling. I forget. I don't know. The movie was stupid, and that's a lot of people. I mean, I didn't get angered by its commentary on gender relations like some people did, but I didn't really find it inspirational either. And I found it a little stupid when some people were taking it that seriously. It's like, because this movie was stupid, make no mistake. Whether you're a feminist or not, this movie was kind of crude and over the top in its commentary on gender. And I don't know, it was moderately funny, and Margot Robbie is very hot, so she was fun to watch, if nothing else, and it had definitely some humorous moments in it. But I thought the movie was just a little too preachy, like a lot of people thought. Even if it wasn't wrong on the things it was preaching, it was just too much. And I didn't really love it, but I didn't hate it. And I saw it twice because then I saw it with my family after the first time I saw it, because they really wanted to see this. So, whatever. Another in the middle movie I saw in 2023, Five Nights at Freddy's. A pretty good horror movie. I mean, not a classic, but pretty good, where, they go to like this old Chuck E. Cheese type place called Freddy's or Five Nights at Freddy's or whatever. And not to give a spoiler, but as you can kind of tell, obviously in the trailer, the big machine animals are alive, and they tend to be kind of dangerous. And I think like I can't even remember now. It's kind of forgettable, but at some point, like they turn on them or something, or I don't know. They're like there's bad machine animals and good machine animals. I can't even really remember. But beginning plot is kind of interesting too, with it being a guy who has he's like a 20-something-year-old guy who has to retain possession of his younger sister, who's like a young kid because her stepmom wants her, and her stepmom just kind of wants to treat her really badly and is kind of an old witch. So he's trying to keep her out of the stepmom's possession, which is an interesting twist because, normally women are always portrayed as ultra maternal and men are always portrayed as, mindless thugs and monkeys. So this movie had kind of a weird angle they were coming off on that, which was interesting, but I don't know. I mean, nothing overly special about this movie. I wouldn't care to see it maybe more than at most one more time, but whatever. I saw it once. It was okay. Another in the middle movie, though. Now we're starting to move into ones that were a little bit more good, almost to the good, top tier. Oppenheimer. So Oppenheimer was, for the first hour or so, a very good movie. I thought a good historical drama, about, what's his, I'm forgetting his first name, John Oppenheimer, Robert Oppenheimer, whatever, who invented the atomic bomb. And up until then, it was very interesting, for the first hour, hour and a half, while they had all the, drama intrigue of creating the bomb, though I found it just at times the pacing dragged a little bit. But then when we got to the last hour, it started to sour quite a bit because after the bomb went boom, not to give you a spoiler, but here's a, shocker. Yeah, the nuclear bomb was detonated, as you all know. Then they went on and on and on about all the litigation with him in Congress about him being a potential communist. And honestly, whether it might be historically accurate, it may not, but it was just so, it just was so unnecessary and prolonged the movie and made it too long. And I just got bored with the ending of it. So, I mean, for that reason, I keep it in the middle tier, whereas some people loved this movie, like my brother, but I didn't really like it that much. I found it to just be too elongated and too boring. Um, okay, then for the last ones, what I consider, okay, now we're moving into the ones that I consider actual good. And this is definitely the bottom of the good, but still a good movie, an anime movie called Suzume. Kind of an interesting plot, with following her and some like kind of, I mean, like, gosh, it's been so long. I'm now spacing out on a little bit of the plot. I forgot on this movie. Well, it follows like her and like some of these supernatural beings, and like Suzume has these, supernatural powers, and she's got to prevent like, I can't. I can't remember a lot of the plot of this movie very well. That probably shows that it actually belongs more in the middle tier, that I've forgotten a lot of it. But I remember enjoying it when I watched it just because, with her like being at the center of the universe and like having these, like the chair, like this guy who's like her friend that was turned into a chair, a talking chair. I'm not describing this well, I'm sorry. It was kind of funny. I don't know, anime is weird and it's sometimes hard to describe anime well. But it was just kind of like, then there was this talking cat following her around too, and it just was interesting. I don't know how else to say it. I could barely remember half the plot that was going on in this movie, but it was still interesting to watch. So I know that's a weird way to put it. But yeah, it was an interesting movie with, these, where this girl's like the center of the universe, and like I think she's got powers, but all these other creatures are following her around. And I don't know, for lack of a better word, I enjoyed it despite the fact that I don't remember half the plot for this movie very well. Okay, now moving on to something I can probably give a better description of. No Hard Feelings. This was a very dumb. Before I get into that, I'm sorry. Actually, better still, a little lower on the list before we get to No Hard Feelings, The Sound of Freedom. A good, solid movie. One I've been meaning to watch again, but I haven't yet got around to it. It's about human trafficking and about a U.S. Department of Defense agent who goes fighting against some of these human trafficking groups on his own vigilante mission, rather than just under the reins of the U.S. government, because they have him reined in to only, help Americans, whereas he wants to help people from other countries. So it follows his journey, as he does it, and at times it's very entertaining. But there's two things about this movie that are very dumb. One, not to a spoiler see of a part of it, but there's a scene where he's fighting against the traffickers and he's like saving the girl from them, and the bullets are whizzing past him and the girl's faces by centimeters as he saves her. And it's like, you do realize if this, first off, I don't think this is how it happened. Second off, even if it was, he's probably just as close to getting her killed as he is from saving her. So, questionable about his level of heroism there. But the other thing about this movie is that, as I read in one article, sometimes, and I'm not trying to downplay downplay the seriousness of human trafficking, but people forget, the targeting of underage kids almost always happens at the local level more than it does at the international level. I mean, there are Jeffrey Epsteins and all that target, young kids in groups that do this, and those are serious, and they are taken seriously by a lot of national governments, but they should be because they're dangerous. But the bulk of abuse, the overwhelming bulk of abuse of underage kids on the part of perverted adults happens on the local level with neighbors, family members, friends, teachers, and that is a statistically proven fact. It is usually not big human trafficking groups, but it makes for better TV to have a big boogeyman, these big international evil groups that have to admit the hard truth that the person most likely to take advantage of a young kid is a friend of yours or a family member of yours. But anyways, that's a pretty heavy topic, so I won't get too deep into that. But that was the only thing about the movie that was stupid, is it was kind of, ignoring that. But, once again, human trafficking is serious, and it did, have a very entertaining storyline. And it's based on a true story. Okay, now getting back to No Hard Feelings. Movie I like better personally than that, but not very many people I think would love this movie, but I think it's definitely a good, solid rom-com. Harkens back more to the days of the early 2000s, as a lot of people said. This movie is, starring Jennifer Lawrence, and I don't know the name of the male actor, but this premise is pretty simple. He's a 19-year-old, and his parents want to help him get out of his shell, so they essentially hire her to be his, kind of like a escort stand-in girlfriend or whatever. And, she's a 32-year-old, struggling, Uber driver or delivery waitress or something. I don't know. But she does this so she can get the parents' car. The parents are rich and they give her this nice car or whatever. She dates their son and helps him pop his cherry, And as a guy who has had a lot of troubles with dating and is in my 30s and still, struggling to get things, on track, I couldn't help but find it funny, and the guy reminded me a little bit of myself back when I was 19, except my parents never paid a gorgeous looking 32-year-old to sleep with me. So, but most people's parents don't, so I'm not unusual in that sense. But it was funny, I like the beginning of it, parts where she's hitting on him and stuff, those are all really funny, and the parts where he's cluelessly rejecting her. But towards the end, I won't try to spoil too much of it, it just got so stupid, with it turning into, this real drama between them and all, where this movie had no right to take itself seriously, but it did, and that kind of ruined it. So that's the only reason it wasn't higher on the list. Okay, another movie that was actually relatively intelligent, and I can't believe I'm saying this despite the fact that it's a Seth Rogen movie, Dumb Money, which was actually smarter than its title implies. It was about the GameStop, incident that happened way back in, I believe, early 2021, late 2020, where a bunch of hedge funders were trying to short sell GameStop. And if those of you who are not in the world of finance, that is kind of my world, that means they're basically selling shares of a company in advance that they don't have so they can count on it going bankrupt. And it does sometimes lead to the bankruptcy of companies when these big hedge funds do that. It is a very questionable practice of finance. I would say that it's not necessarily evil, because sometimes in order for there to be smoke, there has to be fire, and they are often just fast forwarding the deaths of some companies. But some people would argue that it actually causes the deaths of some companies. But it's a finance argument for bankers, and I'm not even that high in the world of banking, so I don't have a right to argue too much about it, and you don't want to probably listen to it anyways. But anyways, the bad guys in this movie, it's based on a true story where some hedge funders were trying to short sell GameStop, but an individual investor called Roaring Kitty, who ran a crappy YouTube channel like mine, decided he liked the stock, and he was personally familiar with GameStop, and he decided it was not over for that company yet. So he stood against the hedge funders, and he actually was right. He did a valuation analysis in the same way Warren Buffett would, the billionaire investor. And again, he was right. And he would have made, turned the moderate savings he had, I don't know, some 5-6 figure number into just millions. But then it sparked a social media frenzy on this website called Wall Street Bets or whatever. And it became hundreds of millions because everybody started throwing their money into GameStop, and GameStop soared, and the hedge funder lost billions. And that's essentially what this movie is about, is that. And not to spoil it for you, but since it's based on a true story, I'm just telling the facts of the true story, which as a finance guy, I found them interesting, though not everybody would. But yeah, I found it still a funny comedy too, they have the guy that plays Ron Swanson from Parks and Rec, Nick Offerman or whatever his name is. He plays one of the hedge fund billionaire bad guys, and then Seth Rogen plays another one of them, and then they have, I don't know, it's got funny, good acting. Oh, Pete Davidson is in it too, though he has a pretty negligible role. But it's decent acting, funny, worth a watch, you know. Definitely not a masterpiece, but I probably a little more tailored to my interests. Okay, the next one, and again, I feel like some of these are a little too tailored to my interests, but I think some of these were very solid movies that were underappreciated. Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. You know, that was my second movie on the top of my list of 2023. Um, Not everybody would like this movie, but as an atheist who comes from a religious background, I found certain themes of it kind of interesting. Now, there was a little bit, as you can imagine, that was a little awkward for me to watch in this movie of it, you know, the themes about teenage puberty for girls that at times I felt like a little bit of a pervert watching it. But I mean, I don't know, it was part of the movie, but that was not the main overwhelming part of it. It was more about just general teenage awkwardness and, you know, for both boys and girls. And I can relate to that because like all teenagers, I was awkward when I was at that age and I'm still awkward. But it also related like, you know, to scenes like, you know, where her parents are fighting about religion and her grandparents try to enforce religion on her parents, and then they also try to enforce it on the young girl in this, but the parents are more secular like myself and they aren't crazy about that. And then on the other flip side, the other side of the family is Jewish, so there's a lot of weird conflicting themes about religion in this that I found interesting. It might not be for everybody, you know, this movie, but I mean, I think that this was a very well made movie and it had very high reviews. Not that, you know, having good high reviews makes a movie good, but I don't think it was just me. This was an underappreciated gem that unfortunately is becoming harder to find in modern cinema because movies like this now usually go straight to streaming, whereas they don't make it to the theaters, and this one did massively underperform at the box office. But it was a good movie. I really enjoyed that overall, and it's based on a book, you know, too. Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. So I would recommend seeing it, unless you know you just absolutely find the ideas of a movie that centers around awkward teenage puberty topics and also religion to be revolting, in which case you probably won't like it. But okay, then moving on, my number one choice of 2023, and I know not everybody would agree with this, but I can't help it because it was my personal favorite, and I think this movie was better than a lot of people give it credit for. Napoleon, uh, starring Joaquin Phoenix. I already made a whole video about this movie because I liked it so much. Now, this movie was not flawless, I'll admit, but I think, you know, and we all can like or dislike different things, but I think this movie was underappreciated. Um, it did have, as someone who takes a huge interest in Napoleon Bonaparte, I have a couple of paintings of him in my apartment. This movie, yeah, it was historically inaccurate in some ways about Napoleon's life, but it actually, and it centered too much around his love life too. That's another criticism I will say of this movie. It was at least 50% of his love life and then 50% on his career. And Napoleon's life was definitely more 80% based around his career and 20% on his love life, if even that. Particularly, you know, his love life between him and Josephine, you know, his wife. Um, and this movie played that up too much, but at least it did it well. You know, they had what was her name? Vanessa Kirby, I think was her name, as the actress that played Josephine. And I thought she was great in her role, you know. And I thought Joaquin Phoenix was very good as Napoleon. You know, he kind of looks French almost, you know. And I thought the acting was good. I thought the special effects were very good. It was a $200 million budget, if I'm correct, so they should have been good. A lot of live action, you know, scenes, not just CGI crap, you know. So there's a lot of good things, and I think the criticisms. Now I know it was historically inaccurate in many ways, but I mean, so have most movies. For instance, comparing it with Gladiator, another Ridley Scott movie that was massively historically inaccurate. This movie was no worse in its historical inaccuracies than that, and I still enjoyed that movie, and a lot of people did. But since this movie wasn't quite as popular as Gladiator, a lot of people just ripped it like crazy for its historical inaccuracies. But you know, I think people just essentially were just doing that because they didn't like the movie. But anyways, this movie, I loved the contrasting like dark themes as well as, you know, some of the battle scenes were very good. You know, they should have done a little more to emphasize things about Napoleon's life on the whole, but they did, you know, present more of his vulnerable side while in the movie, like, you know, his vulnerable side in dating, his vulnerable side in politics, and even his vulnerable side in his career and military affairs, because he he did preside over what was at the time the biggest military disaster in history at the Russia invasion of Russia. So but that's what I did like, that he humanized him, but they did probably not give enough positive attention to him on like his victories and on his great military genius. And and they focused too much on the romance, but they did it all well enough that I didn't care. And at first, when I saw the movie too, I thought it was maybe a little long, and I was expecting the director's cut, or I thought it was long, but I thought it would be even better when they added in some of the stuff from the director's cut. Though when I saw the director's cut, actually, the director's cut was worse. I saw that on Apple TV, and usually with Ridley Scott movies, the director's cut is much better. But in this case, no, it actually was not. The director's cut was much worse, so I would not recommend seeing it. It was really boring. It added only one or two scenes that were necessary or good to the movie, but overall, I think this movie is underrated. It had a lot of well executed scenes in it, and a lot of historical accuracies. One thing I learned about this movie that I didn't know from watching it before was that Josephine, part of how she got sick and she died early was that she was wearing some kind of skimpy clothing when she was flirting with Tsar Alexander of Russia, who came to visit her. And I didn't know that's how she got sick, and, I didn't realize that he was even there flirting with her like that, or basically not flirting, but just kind of maybe trying to just humiliate Napoleon a little bit, but I don't know. Point just being, I learned some stuff that I didn't know before from watching it, so I don't think that it's necessarily terrible in its historical inaccuracies. And, very good acting, good production value. I think, it's not for everyone, but I personally loved it, and I think a lot of people would like it more than they think they would if they would just kind of come into it with an open mind. But anyways, those are my movies I saw in 2023. Maybe not all of them you'd agree with. If you do or don't, feel free to say why. But as usual, thanks for watching, and see you next time. Bye.